Hey, everybody. Today's episode of the podcast is sponsored by Alphabet City Films. Please watch our film, The Trouble, starring John Vogel, Christian Torres Villalobos, and Maria Di Simone. You could watch the film on Amazon Prime and Tubi TV. To find out how to watch the film, please visit our website at troublefilm.com. So our guest today is Rashaad Ernesto Green. For those of you not familiar with his work, in the past he's had success at Sundance, having his shorts premiere there, as well as his first feature film, Gun Hill Road, which starred Isai Morales and Judy Reyes. He's been an episodic director of television shows such as Luke Cage, Supernatural, and Being Mary Jane. His latest film, Premature, starring Zora Howard and Joshua Boone, which also premiered at Sundance, was nominated for an Independent Spirit Award in the John Cassavetes Award section. Rashaad was the winner of the Someone to Watch Award at this year's Film Independent Spirit Awards for Premature. It's been released by IFC Films, and for more info on how you could watch it, please visit the website prematurefilm.com. Without further ado, please enjoy the episode where I had a nice talk with Rashaad about Premature, as well as the films that have been influential to him.
Welcome to the FilmSEEN podcast.
All right. We're so excited to have Rashaad Ernesto Green on FilmSEEN. Thank you, Rashaad, for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me.
So I saw Premature, loved it, and it's been exciting to actually see the progression of your work as a filmmaker, because I've been following your work since screening your short films back in the day in Times Square, which I don't even know if you remember that. But we screened Premature and your film Cuts and the early shorts. And
was it in Times Square?
It was near Times Square. It was on 44th Street at the Producers Club back in the day.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And actually, it's been a while since I saw you. I think the last time I saw you was in 2014 at the Cannes Film Festival. And we ran into each other walking down the street, all dressed up, coming from a party or something.
Oh, nice.
And, so I remember seeing the short film version of Premature. And, you know, I want to be careful because I don't want to give any spoilers about your feature film, but it's safe enough to say that it's different than the short film. There's some similar themes, but it's definitely
a departure.
Right.
For sure. Yeah.
So I'm also kind of curious about the title, like keeping the same title.
Yeah. So when Zora and I got into a room, Zora's the lead in the film. She plays Ayana. She was the lead in the short film from 2008 as well. And we've been friends ever since that time. I cast her when she was 14. Over the last few years, she's all grown up now. We were talking about working on something else together and collaborating on something. And we got into the room finally, after a few years of just talking crap, and said, let's write a feature together. And we decided to write a love story, because we wanted to offer alternative to the kind of black cinema that we had been used to seeing, which is often, you know, an overabundance of films that deal with black victimization, fear, suffering, pain, and the like. And so I decided to explore black life and black love instead. And while we were drafting this love story, themes from the short film began to influence us. Scenes, events, setting, character began to creep its way into the story. And so we embraced those elements, and the two became one.
Amazing. And her performance was outstanding. And it actually took, because she is grown up now, it actually took me a while to see that it was the same girl from the short. And so that was kind of a cool moment looking that up. And I was like, oh, wow. It was, you know.
Yeah, and the short was a while ago. Yeah, so people don't often put it together.
Yeah, so that was pretty great. And in general, the performances were amazing, man.
Thank you.
I would love to know a little bit about your process behind that. And obviously you had a great cast as well, so you have a good eye for picking talent.
Yeah.
But I would love for you to speak a little bit about your directing process when it comes to working with actors.
Now, I don't know if you knew this, but I was an actor first. I went to NYU graduate acting school, earned a master's in acting. I was in school with Susan Kelechi Watson, and Corey Stoll was in my class. Sterling K. Brown was a couple of years ahead of me. Denai Gurira was right behind me. So I was in school with some wonderful, wonderful talent, and the professors were incredible. And I came out in the real world, acting being my first passion, and realized that the industry wasn't what I had hoped it would be. And I went back to film school, because I didn't want to necessarily wait around for the industry to catch up, So I decided to start making films on my own, start making the films that I wanted to see on screen, that delved into our lives and our culture in a ways that I felt represented. So when I approach the writing, when I approach the directing, it's always from that foundation of acting. So when I'm casting, I'm always looking for that magical element that somebody has that feels like, they can bring a level of authenticity to the screen, to their performance. And if they don't have it, if they're a non-actor, I still am looking for that germ.
Yeah.
And so sometimes I'll combine actors and non-actors, and you won't necessarily be able to tell the difference because they keep each other on their toes. And, hopefully what I'm able to bring with the background that I have is I'm able to suss out that performance that sometimes they don't even know is there. And so that's what I bring to the table. And when I went to film school initially, I was nervous. I thought, I'm in trouble because I hadn't had a background in film education. And there were a lot of my classmates who, had done their undergrad degree in filmmaking, and I had a large learning curve to get over. And what I didn't realize at the time was that I had a pretty decent foundation to telling stories, having come from an acting background and the theater. I knew sort of inherently that there is an obstacle in every scene, and that you start off the scene in one way and you end it in another, that the character has an overall objective and a journey over the entire piece, or whether it's a play or a film, that you start in one place. There's a beginning, and there's a middle and an end to that character's journey, to the story. And so, I had tools that I was unaware of, that I had been working on for most of my career up until that point, without necessarily knowing that I was working those tools. And so when I'm directing, I still am coming from that actors.
I think that's a great sensibility. I know that you also co-wrote the script with Zora Howard that played Ayanna. Yeah. And what was that process like in developing the story with her and actually writing out the script?
Yeah. So, I mean, not only did we work together, but we had been friends for a long time. I cast her when she was 14 in the short, but I had known her since she was 11 years old. So there was a foundation of trust there. I don't know if I could have done that process with anyone.
Yeah.
We had a shorthand with each other. We can call each other out. We can get into fuss and fights, and we knew that it would be all right.
Right. There's a respect there.
There was a respect, but also there was the ability to be honest. Sometimes when you're working with someone that you don't know very well, everything, you're trying to be careful all of the time, and you're not always yourself.
Right. And sometimes there's pleasantries that you just,
yeah. And sometimes it can take a long time, I think, to just get to the meat of the matter.
Yeah.
Where Zora and I, we didn't really waste too much time because we knew each other well and knew we weren't going anywhere.
You guys didn't sugarcoat anything.
We didn't sugarcoat anything. I mean, maybe to a little extent, to a small extent, because, yes, we were friends, but this was the first time we were working together in this capacity.
Right.
So there was a little bit of I don't want to offend her, and she didn't want to offend me. So, the worst thing, an artist wants to hear is no, that your idea is crap, but, and no, she wasn't afraid to tell me, but she was, she was respectful, and likewise,
Well, clearly there's that foundation of respect, that she respects you as an artist and what you bring to the table, and how impactful your short film was. I remember screening your short film and just having the whole audience just like, you know, at the end of it, you know, it's just like a visible, you know, like a visceral sort of feeling. And I think that's what ties into the power of cinema and kind of why we do this as filmmakers, to get that sort of impactful reaction. And so, you know, I guess that's what's sort of nice about your collaboration, is there was this also, aside from you knowing her as a friend, and you guys have worked together and she trusted you also as an artist.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So yeah, you know, we got into the room and just asked ourselves what we wanted to talk about. And so we once we decided on a love story, we just shared our own stories about our past relationships, the loves of our life, the heartbreaks. We talk forever, you know, and we shared art that we were inspired by, influenced by, whether it be films, music, novels. We shared with each other, and we watched films together. We listened to music together, and then we started drafting together. Was
there stuff that she put you onto and vice versa that maybe you hadn't been exposed to before, whether it was films or anything like that?
100%. 100%. You know, Zora is a spoken word artist, and so she comes from the world of poetry. So she also brought in music that I hadn't heard of, and musicians that that she introduced me to. And yes, she brought in a lot of that stuff. And then films wise, you know, we revisited some films that we had both seen, obviously from the 90s and 80s, and then I introduced her to films that she hadn't seen as well. And we sat there, we watched it, we talked about it, and we let it take over us.
Nice.
Yeah.
I get the feeling, my philosophy about actual relationships and love stories is that each one is unique. It's almost like a fingerprint. And so it's kind of interesting seeing this unique story of Ayanna and Isaiah develop, and kind of seeing where it's going to go, and taking certain conventions and then defying other conventions, you know? So I thought that was really cool, of sort of how organic it kind of developed. And by the moment that they actually have their first kiss, I thought it was super impactful.
Oh, cool. Yeah. We weren't necessarily trying to reinvent the wheel or anything like that. You know, love often looks similar in people's lives, but, you know, to make it as specific as we could to the characters that we were creating, you know, hopefully it feels authentic.
No, there was definitely a degree of specificity. And even in the scene where they first meet, I thought that you did something really brilliant, which I want to kind of unpack, because Isaiah is talking to her in the swings, and I love that shot when it's at night in the park and they're in the swing set, and she's kind of cold to him. She doesn't really give him the time of day, but upon really examining that moment and where her headspace is, earlier in the day, she was there in the park with her friends, and it seemed like she was kind of breaking it off with another young guy. And so you're kind of in her headspace of, you know, at first it seems like she's kind of a cold character, but really thinking about that moment, you're like, well, you could see why. It makes perfect sense of why maybe she doesn't want to hear this guy kicking game. And she talks about
guys and knuckleheads.
And she talks about it in a very poetic way. It's like kicking game, like, or I don't want to botch the line. So it was a great line though.
Yeah. I mean, she's kind of over dudes, you know, in the way they are, especially young dudes.
Yeah.
You know, who don't know what they want, and they're always trying to play games.
Right.
You know, and here this guy is showing some interest, and she clearly is attracted to him, but she always knows, you know, she knows that guys always have a line.
Yeah.
You know?
And his presence is very poeticized in general. So I like how that was there with the character, and your use of poetry in the film. Was that something that was there from the beginning, or is that something that kind of evolved to that point?
Well, the funny thing was that we didn't write any poetry into the film at all. The poetry is Zora's domain. You know, she comes from the spoken word world. And so we made Ayanna a writer. We knew that she would be a poet, but we weren't going to actually hear any poetry in the film proper. There was none in the script. And when we got to production, there was none there either. But during one scene in particular, the scene where he reads her journal and discovers her writing, we were going to, you know how the scene ends is where she starts to read that poem to him. The scene ended on paper where she's about to start speaking and it cuts to another scene. But on the day when we were shooting it, I thought, well, we're here. You know, why don't you just say a poem? You know, I'm sure you have a few, you know, memorized. You know, Zora had, she's written books of poetry. And so she just pulled one out of the hat, you know. And I said, you know, this is probably not going to make the film at all. You know, this is just something to have just to be able to cut out of, you know. But we did it several times and she finished the poem each time. And so when we got into the cutting room, my editor, Justin Chan, he edited the montage of, and I don't want to necessarily give away the film, but there's a moment where she goes to the doctor, and the montage was done with poetry over it, that poetry from that scene. It carries over into this montage at the doctor, and it worked really well, you know. But it stood out as sort of like the only poetry in the film, and so when we were assembling and realizing that we needed a little bit more of a way into Ayana's internal thought process and what she was feeling, her interiority, we felt like poetry might be a nice way to get us there. And so from the editing room, I'd call Zora and ask her if she could throw me a couple of lines of poetry. You know, she was like, well, what's it about? What's the scene? You know, and I was like, okay, so, you know, in the train, when you guys, you're looking at the couple kissing, give me something about, you know, I don't know, yearning for love. And she'd be like, oh, okay, well, what's the shot? Oh, okay, it's my eyes, and then it's me looking at a couple. Yeah. And then like the next day or, you know, a couple of days, she would just shoot just a couple of lines of poetry, and we just place it, you know, like, you know, via the iPhone or something, you know, the voice recorder. She sent it, and that's what ended up in the film.
Amazing. Yeah. And I love how that evolved sort of very organically.
Yeah.
So I think here's the litmus test of how to show how great of a movie and how much I love the movie is. I was here in my office on Thursday, and when I got the screener link, I was only planning on watching 5 minutes before heading home. I take the Metro North home to Westchester, and I was let me just watch the first 5 minutes of the movie, because I feel like you could always learn a lot from the way a filmmaker opens a film in the first 5 minutes. So I like to sometimes just absorb that. But I watched the first 5 minutes. I called my wife. I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm going to be late. And I just sat and watched the whole thing. I couldn't take my eyes off of it.
Thank you. Yeah.
So yeah, very, very well done. And I want to ask more about the casting of Isaiah's character, because their chemistry was amazing.
Yeah.
So was that a difficult role to cast?
I'd say yes, because we didn't necessarily know anyone to fit the description. You know, we wrote the role, and there was a young man I had in mind from LA who's a wonderful actor, and met him when we had a reading in New York. We put the feelers out there and asked everyone that we knew, you know, to recommend somebody who fit this description. And, you know, neither one of us had worked with Josh, but he came recommended and came to the reading and hadn't finished the script yet, but had such a handle on who Isaiah was that his interpretation, I just made me fall in love with him.
Yeah.
And the character. And he was a little bit older than what we had written the role to be, but when casting the actual casting process came around, I just asked them to come in looking young. It's just
that's probably the best direction you could give.
Come in fresh, man.
Yeah.
And he did, and it was tough, but what he brought to the table was just exactly what the character needed, and because not kind of everybody was playing a little bit younger than they were.
Yeah. But it works.
Yeah, it works. Yeah, it works. And that was, so made that game time decision, and I never look back. Their chemistry is just so kinetic. I mean, you feel it from the moment that they look at each other.
Yes.
And the scene where they're falling in love in the Caribbean Day Parade.
Yeah.
Was the first time that they had worked together.
Wow.
Yeah, that was supposed to be our rehearsal day.
Amazing. Just
threw him out there and we're like, go be in love.
Yeah. I love that. And I like how the park is sort of a backdrop in a lot of the scenes from the movie, because I think just in general, from being a New Yorker and being born in Manhattan and just seeing a lot of recognizable places, and I had kind of a surreal moment because I was taking the Metro North train home that night, and I was literally thinking about the film, and then I'm sitting there, the stop opens up, and it's 125th Street at the same exact location as as one of the scenes in the movie, and so I thought that was kind of a surreal moment.
Yeah,
and then seeing the shrine. I used to actually film at the shrine. I have to give a shout out to my girl Exanda that I used to film at the shrine, and my friends Tan and Righteous. When I was first getting started out as a filmmaker, I was filming artists.
Yeah. It was great. The funny you mentioned, Harlem, being like almost in character in the film. All of the major the major 4 roles in the film, everyone lives like within a 4 or 5 block radius in Harlem. Me, Zora, Joshua, who plays Isaiah, and Michelle Wilson, who plays Ayana's mother.
That's amazing.
All live within a 5 block radius in Harlem.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And that just sort of happened. I know that.
Yeah, happenstance.
Yeah, that is happenstance. Wow.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't know where Josh was living, and he just happens to be from the South too. So we wrote this character that's a transplant to Harlem from the South, and found the transplant to Harlem from the South.
That's amazing.
and he's fantastic. And as far as yes, he's a musician in the film, but Josh has a musical background as well. He sings just as well as he acts. He's a Broadway singer, and
wow.
He's fantastic talent.
Yeah, and I liked how music was part of the backdrop, and just I guess the nuanced sort of nature of him as a character, being a musician that can't quite finish things. I was kind of curious about the evolution of that as sort of a character arc, because I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, we all struggle as artists, right?
Yes.
So, we gave his character something to wrestle with, and he's dealing with the passing of his father, and how that has inhibited him, because how he measures himself up to his father and the kind of artist and musician that his father was. And so it makes him stagnant to an extent. And we've all gone through that, and we know what that is. Obviously the reasons being different for everyone.
100%.
But yeah, we wanted to give him something that he was wrestling with internally, to make his character 3-dimensional.
Amazing. And the performance of the mother was also an amazing find, and just the dynamics of the relationship between Ayana and her mother, and the scene with her in the kitchen when she just knows, doesn't say a word, but the reaction, I thought that was completely brilliant. And that's just cinematic. gold, really.
Michelle Wilson is an absolute blessing. Not only as an actress and performer, but as a human being. And she's she's a gift. She came into the audition room, and we had that scene where she discovers that I don't know if we want to give everything away, but she discovers that Ayana's up to something.
Yeah, I know. I have to press a button that says "spoiler alert." That's the yeah.
But you know, in the scene that we had in the script, there were just a couple of words that we had written there at the end of the scene, and it was like, "Oh, Ayana," something like that.
Yeah.
But on the day, Michelle, I don't know if she didn't have the fold of the page, or it was on the next page, but she didn't say those two words for whatever reason. And she just looked at Zora, who was in the casting room as well, and just with that intensity. And it was so clear that that's all that scene needed was that intense silence that Michelle gave, because you didn't need any words. She was saying everything that she needed to say with that stare.
It was so impactful.
And so we just cut those words. We cast Michelle, and she was able to deliver on the day. And every single scene that she steps into, she's just so natural, and really, really helped us ground this film.
Yeah, I loved even on the establishing scene where you first saw her, and Ayana's like, I'm going out with T. She's like, oh, you're going out with T. You could tell that she knows that she's lying, but is not quite calling her out on it in the moment. But she's just like, text me when you get there, you know?
Yeah.
But it's like she knows. And
yeah, so, Michelle, she raised a daughter as a single mother in Harlem. And so she had a lot of experience, you know, so by the time that she came to this role, she's drawing from, you know, a lifetime having lived that role.
There's a level of authenticity that
I mean, sense. And you know, just a note on actors in New York. I mean, she's a Broadway performer, Tony nominated, Obie Award winning actress, and you know, I hadn't like necessarily seen like a huge reel with film credits and stuff like that. So for her to actually go into the audition room having such a body of work behind her, and the talent that she has, to humble, you know, to be humble enough to enter a room and do the work necessary. I have to take my hat off to her for being so willing to assist us with her talent.
That's amazing. Yeah. That is a testament to a lot of talented actors in New York, and she certainly has the chops.
Yeah.
They all do in your film. So
yeah.
I'm sure you've been hearing that a lot, that the performances are just outstanding. So
yeah, I mean, that's the part of the process that I think I love the most, you know, is directing actors who are just willing to be there and play, you know. Yeah. And that group of friends, not everyone in there has acted before. Alexis Marie Wint was on the spoken word scene with Zora. Had never acted in anything, but she had performed. You know, she had performed on stages with the spoken word. She just had such a vivacious personality, and she's an extrovert. And she was when the idea was thrown to her, she ate it up. She was like, "Yeah, of course, let's do this," you know. Yeah. And Imani Lewis, another blessing. You know, I hadn't worked with her before. I'd seen her briefly in 8th grade. She was in that film, and she came into the audition room, and she just blew us away. She was just fantastic. And Tashiana Washington, also a wonderful, wonderful talent who I'd worked with on Gun Hill Road. Getting them all together, they were just riffing off each other and talking over each other. I mean, they just, you can't tell, you know, the scripted lines from where they ad-libbed a little and where they just threw in little flourishes. Like, it just all flows.
Yeah. So You got to upgrade your shit. Was that in the script or was that an ad-lib line?
That was in the script. Yeah. That was in the script. Yeah.
It felt ad-lib in the best possible way.
Yeah. I would say that it was mostly scripted. You know, I would say it was a good 95%. But it's some of the little touches, you know, just make it all flow.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And I like how it even starts off where you sort of hear the subway, and then the first shot that you see of Ayanna is her actually looking at this other couple that's sitting down in the subway car. So I thought that was kind of a cool little kind of touch of you're watching her observing these other people.
Right.
And I think that ties into cinema in general, is that it's sort of a voyeuristic sort of medium that we're just interested in kind of watching, you know, characters and people's lives to some extent, and especially when there's a lot of depth of these characters that make them interesting to watch.
Right.
That tie into story itself. So
yeah, I mean, with that first, you know, when we're introduced to her, we wanted to, you know, get you into her mindset immediately. You know, into what she's yearning for, even if her friends don't know. You know, we know immediately what she's after.
I like that.
Yeah.
And it was funny too when they got out of the subway platform and just kind of the riffing with those other young men.
Right. Yeah.
And it's what I find that's interesting too is, and what I really like that you did, because there's a lot of people that make characters, they make them sort of a certain type, like, hey, this is the strong character and they're just strong and that's how they are. But you made Ayanna very nuanced and a lot of depth on her character, that, you know, she is strong. You know, she does stand up for herself, but then there's also the vulnerability too that kind of shows throughout the story without trying to give anything away. But it's realistic. I mean, people aren't always one way the whole time. There's sort of, you know, that emotional kind of peaks and valleys that I think you showed with both characters.
Yeah,
Isaiah as well.
I think in order to keep an audience interested, you have to show growth of character. You know, if you're one way the whole time and you haven't changed over the course of a story, then why are we watching that story?
Absolutely. But it wasn't just like it was just done very well, is what I'm trying to comment on. It was a organic sort of nuanced, really very realistic.
Yeah. I mean, we try to bring 3 dimensions to every character that's on the screen, and not necessarily, you know, paint someone in a one-dimensional way.
Yeah.
You know, we want, you know, everybody to be right and wrong and have feelings and depth and history, and we want these decisions to be tough and difficult for them. We didn't want anything to be easy. And
for sure, I felt as an audience, you know, just a level of empathy for the characters, you know, that you're really kind of on their emotional trajectory. Yeah. So amazing film. And is there anything, I guess, else that you want to touch upon the making of this film, or just anything else you want to talk about Premature before we sort of get to the next segment of the podcast? I mean, it was a real labor of love. You know, if you want a real taste of independent, gritty New York filmmaking, go check us out. I can vouch for that. Comes highly recommended for myself. Yeah. So I guess that kind of ties into the second segment of the podcast to talk about what kind of films really inspired and influenced you as a filmmaker. Yeah, I mean, there's so many. There's so many. You know, but I didn't necessarily know I was going to be a filmmaker, so I had to give myself a little bit of a film education. Once I got to film school, but the films that I grew up on the films of Spike Lee. And Spike Lee was your teacher, if I'm not mistaken, right? Oh yeah, Spike Lee was my professor at NYU, and one of the major reasons why I attended NYU Graduate Film School, because not only did he attend there, that not only did he go there himself, he also taught there. And he encouraged you. Yeah.
Yeah, very much so. Once I was in school, I've been a fan of his since my earliest memories of film.
She's got to have it.
There was always that one I was a little bit young for.
Right.
Because the subject matter was very, very sexy. So my dad didn't allow me to watch that one when it came out.
Yeah.
That's
understandable. I don't think I was familiar with that one until later on myself.
Yeah. It was and what was the second one? Was the one at the college, School Days.
Yeah.
Yeah, that one also had some scenes that I wasn't allowed to see when I was young. But when Do the Right Thing came around, that was it for us. I mean, we watched that film so many times. Pivotal moment in my life, just to be able to see, someone who I felt represented me, somebody who looked like me, telling stories about us. And so, yeah, that was a huge one for us. And so Do the Right Thing was a huge one. And I watched every single film of his that came out. It was always an event. And I remember when I went to the theater with my father to see Malcolm X, Jungle Fever was one, Mo Better Blues, and all those ones that came out like in the early 90s, back to back,
Yeah.
And then when Boys in the Hood came out, that was another big one. Love, and God bless, John Singleton, who's passed now.
Rest in peace to John Singleton.
Yeah,
for sure. Yeah. Tragic loss.
That film, man, that was like I wanted to be Trey, and I felt like that was representing how my father raised us. We come from a single father household, my brother and I, and saw so much of my dad in Furious Styles. And so, that overprotective dad who was, on the straight and narrow and trying to keep us out of harm's way the best he knew how.
Yeah.
Really, really identified with that film. And then
that was an amazing film, man.
Yeah.
And I saw it. So me and my brother used to just watch that film over and over again, and it was such a good movie. And I remember just even being a kid in the Bronx.
Mm-hmm.
I remember being at my cousin Wilson's house, and his older brother Rob had this movie with the cover. I'm like, what is that? Like, this movie is what's going on. And so then we would watch that movie. We loved it. And I guess that was my first exposure to Ice Cube as well. And as far as him acting, especially, and when you're a kid, for us, maybe I couldn't articulate why I thought it was cinematically brilliant, but seeing it now, like seeing it later on, not only does it hold up, you just realize, wow, John Singleton was ahead of his time.
Oh, absolutely. What was he, in his 20s when
he was 23 years old, I think, when he was nominated for an Academy Award for that film, and the youngest Academy Award nominee of all time, I think, and I could be mistaken, but I think to date for Best Director in the Best Director category, beating Orson Welles, which amazing. And just for him, because there's so much in that film, it's incredible.
Yeah, really. And I didn't know, I didn't know any film language at that time. I just was watching a film that had a deep and profound effect on me. But of course, going back, you go, man, did this guy know what he was doing?
Yeah.
Like, wow.
Yeah, definitely a master of the craft.
For sure.
Is there a scene in that film that's particularly, I mean, there's so many amazing scenes, but is there a particular scene when you think about that film that you think about that's impactful that you want to discuss?
There are a few scenes in that film. There are a few scenes that stand out for me. When Trey as a young boy is over his father's house, and there's a thief in the middle of the night that it's coming to look through the house to steal something. The way that's shot and the way that's depicted, young Trey is going to the bathroom to take a leak and Furious hears something, leans over to get the pistol, and it's so tense, and the dripping of the water in the tub, like you just hear it over and over again, and then he blows the shots through the door, and there's a life lesson for young Trey there. You should have shot him dead. He said, nah. He said, that would have just been another black man, dead. And
then when the cop shows
cop shows up and says, it's a shame you didn't get him, and this is not the lesson Furious wants for his son. That same cop, this is now when Trey is older, 10 years later, is the one that stops him on the street when he's with Ricky. And the anger and the self-hatred this cop has for his own kind. I remember, being so, introduced to that aspect of self-hatred within the culture, when one of your own can take the role of the oppressor. And in that instance, takes Trey out the car and says, you look like one of these Crenshaw Mafia MFers and blah, 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 and holds the gun to his neck. I remember being so affected by that.
I will say, even when I first saw the movie, thinking back at it as a young kid, I think it was the first time that I had a realization that how much environment affects people. I'm like, oh, this kid, Trey, is a good kid, but just his environment is, the opportunities that he has in that environment are vastly different than what he would have had, somewhere else. And I do remember thinking that as a young kid, but also John Singleton established that as a filmmaker that, and the characters very well, that growing up with me, I don't know. It's very masterful filmmaking. And just from a 23-year-old, I mean, the fact that he was that young, I don't even know what I was doing at 23. This man was making a film that lasts a test of time. Yeah, just incredible. And then, of course, in that same film hey, spoiler alert, in case you haven't seen Boys in the Hood, somebody dies. But that sequence when the guys that they had trouble with at the auto event are looking for trouble, and they see the car and they try to split up and run away. Just that whole sequence is imprinted on my memory forever. When Ricky meets his destiny and Trey witnesses it. It's just an incredible sequence, incredible filmmaking. Incredible. So, thinking about a second film that you'd want to maybe discuss the scene, is there any that come to mind?
I mean, we can talk about Do the Right Thing. We can talk about Rocky. What else?
I think we have to talk about Rocky, because that's another. I love that film, and that's another very impactful film. When I was a kid, Rocky IV was my favorite movie. I'm like, oh, Rocky IV, like he beats the Russian, and it's like we were obsessed with Rocky IV,
right? But
then seeing all the movies later on, the first Rocky was definitely, I mean, that's my favorite one for sure.
It's incredible.
It's so incredible.
Incredible film by John G. Avildsen.
Yeah.
Directed as well as Lean on Me and Karate Kid. Did you know that?
I knew that he directed Karate Kid. Did not know that he directed Lean on Me, which is another great movie.
Yeah. He had a string of them. He's gone now as well.
Yeah, rest in peace to John G. Avildsen.
Yeah, he's fantastic, and not too many people are aware that he had many hits in the 80s there. And Rocky, man, what a character study. And just there's a scene where he gets a shot at the title, and Mickey, the guy that's the trainer at the gym, old man, comes over to Rocky's house and basically asks him if he can be his manager.
Burgess Meredith.
Yeah, if he can be his trainer. And Burgess Meredith. And Sylvester Stallone is as Rocky kind of dismisses him because
Mickey would call him a bum.
Called him a bum
up to that point.
And it also took away his locker at the gym.
Yeah, because Rocky was actually kind of doing errands for wise guys in the mob.
Exactly. Yeah. He was the muscle for a mob guy, and Mickey didn't approve of his lifestyle, of his choice in life, and he said that he had talent, but he wasted it. But now here Rocky has a chance, shot at the title, and Mickey wants to help, and Rocky doesn't take kind to it. He feels very, very offended that Mickey's never been to his house before. So what's wrong with my house? My house stinks, and it's just the buildup of that scene. It's just with Burgess Meredith, like just humbling himself and talking about his glory days. his career and his glory days, and having his nose broken however many times, and just the way you could see that he's in desperate need of this chance as well, and Rocky has the ability to give it to him, and it's sad because he's almost groveling or begging for this opportunity, with a man who, like, the power dynamic has shifted. Up until this point, all you have seen is Burgess Meredith's Mickey, sort of
literally calling him a bum. You're a bum.
Yeah, you're a bum. And Mickey clearly has the power in the gym. Kicks him out of his locker. We need the locker for real contenders, and now Rocky is a contender.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden now Mickey needs something from Rocky, not the other way around. And but you can tell that he's coming from a lifetime of needing this shot. It's not just about Rocky.
There's
it's
so much on. There's
life.
so much on the line. There's so much. There's everything on the line.
Yeah.
That's true. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And it's the story of an underdog.
And Rocky very much needs the help too. It needs that love from this man as well. But he's so proud. He's so proud. His ego has been bruised, and he's very weary of people who haven't helped him up until this point, helping him now. Yeah. He says, where were you? Where were you 10 years ago when I really needed you? And Mickey can't really say anything, and he leaves. He leaves with sort of hanging his head.
And then Rocky's still saying it, screaming it out.
Rocky's just venting and getting it out and banging the door. And he's like, what's going to happen when I meet Apollo Creed? I'm going to get this. Bang. I'm going to get my face busted in. Where were you? And all of this. And through the bathroom door. He had to go to the bathroom because he couldn't disrespect the man to his face. He goes into the bathroom. He closes the door and he's yelling and he's yelling and he's yelling. And Mickey's just listening to it, and then he leaves. And then Mickey forgets his hat in the room. And Rocky, thinking he's gone, comes out of the bathroom. Mickey had to come back and get the hat. And so they see each other for a second. And Rocky's like, oh, and goes back into the bathroom.
It's like the awkward moment.
And just that look on Burgess Meredith's face, like, and he has to leave, and just that shot when Rocky comes out of the building, it's dark, and it's like, I don't know if they did a wet down, but it's just the most beautiful Philadelphia street, and
then the score lightly trickles in,
and the score is there, and Rocky comes out, and it's a wide shot, and he runs after Mick, and there's no dialogue that you hear, but you just see the body language that he's, accepting Mick's assistance, and it's gonna have him train him.
amazing.
Yeah, oh, it's so good. Oh,
So
it's
good.
so good.
I think what's a scene in Rocky that's also amazing, that every time I'm always awestruck when I see the film, and it's just kind of a little moment, but for me it's a big moment when Apollo Creed, his whole team is in the office and they're sort of just, you know, they're so dismissive of Rocky. They're
absolutely.
like, okay, I'm going to steamroll right over this guy. And that Rocky is on the TV, then hitting
the meat.
hitting the meat, and then just like nobody in the office is paying attention to
Yeah,
it.
except his trainer, right?
Right.
Yeah, the trainer's, hey, you might want to look at this. Yeah.
Right. That's true. Right. Yeah.
He's sitting there like, huh?
Yeah.
He's breaking ribs. Yeah. He was concerned, but yeah, it was a great setup.
Yeah.
It was a great setup to what obviously is the final showdown. And
just even the way that movie ends is not how you would expect, you know, and but in the most brilliant way possible. And actually just seeing their friendship sort of blossom. I love that too, how they start off as adversaries and then kind of they end up becoming such tight friends that, you know, Rocky IV is about avenging his.
Oh, I see. Yeah. And the subsequent Rockies.
Yeah, the subsequent Rockies. So I do like that, the fact that they become great friends.
Now we have a whole nother franchise.
That's true, right? Yeah, which amazingly done. I haven't seen the second one yet, but the first one definitely blew me away.
Yeah.
So what's next on the agenda, Rashaad? As far as what are the next plans? I know you're just finished in this film, maybe.
Yeah.
But is there any other plans that you want to talk about, or any things just in the future, what we could look forward to? Or
I mean, I hope to keep on making films. You know, I signed on to a couple projects right now, and working it out, and
amazing.
We'll see what happens. But yeah, just always looking to tell stories that provoke thought and touch us in some way, and make us feel closer to one another. I mean, that's what we do, right?
Absolutely. Very well said. On that note, well, I greatly appreciate you coming on the podcast, and always a pleasure to see you, and wish you
great. Hey, thank you so much, man.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you for listening to the Film Scene podcast with Zeph Kota. Produced by Alex Gray. Executive producer Jeff Cutler. Original music by Yuri Ryback. Sponsored by Alphabet City Films.